So the full form of LINQ is the language integrated query. It provides a new way to manipulate data. Manipulation of data means all the crude operations:
Okay.
create, update, delete, resolve, all those things. So manipulate whether it is to or from a database or with XML file or with a simple list of dynamic data. So LINQ can be used for with databases. It can be used with XML files to
Hmm.
manipulate XML data. It can be used for dynamic data also. Dynamic data can be collections, a list or a collection. So LINQ can be used not only for database, it can be used for XML files. It can be used for other purposes like to work with collections.
I see.
So LINQ is a uniform query system, you can see. So the same query can be used to work with different databases. Whereas if you don't use LINQ, the SQL query will be different for every database, which is cumbersome. So LINQ is a uniform query system in C# to retrieve data from a different sources of data and formats. It is integrated with C# to eliminate the mismatch between programming language and database. Now, that's the problem that if you are a fully a developer and you're working in the backend side, you'll only work in the backend side. Similarly, a developer working in the front end side will always work in the front end. LINQ is a bridge between the front end and the back end. So the if you know LINQ, you can basically work as a front end and back end together.
I see.
All right. So it provides a single query interface for different sources of data. Different sources of data can be XML file, it can be a database, it can be dynamic data based collections. For example, SQL is a structured query language that is
Mhm.
used to save and retrieve data from a database. In the same manner, LINQ is a structured query syntax also. But it is a uniform query structure, not like SQL. SQL is a not a uniform query structure. The query structure will differ from one database to another.
Right.
LINQ is built in C#. It is used to retrieve data from different types of sources as XML, documents, collections, ADO.NET, dataset, web service, MS SQL Server, and other database servers like Oracle, Informix, MySQL, PostgreSQL, etc. It
Right.
can work with all of them. Okay. Now this is how the diagram looks like. If you look at a developer who understands the LINQ query, would be able to work with object collection with ADO.NET, data sets with XML documents, with entity frameworks, with SQL databases, with other data sources. So if you look at there is basically if the developer understands the LINQ query, he will be able to work with links to objects, but there will be a middleware object collection. If the developer wants to work with data sets, link to data set, there will be area.NET data set. If the link query based developer wants to work with XML, it's called link to XML. And the middle interface will be XML docs. Link to entity, you have to use the entity framework for a link. So we'll see that what is the meaning of this. It means that the language integrated query was introduced in C# 3.0 and .NET Framework 3.5. Now, this is where the scenario I was telling you, what is the advantage of LINQ over structured query language. Suppose that we are working in SQL Server database. So for that, there is a need to learn SQL Server syntax, SQL
Mhm.
related ADO.NET objects.
Right.
Okay. Now, after some time, we want to switch to Oracle database. So again, we need to grab command on Oracle related syntax and Oracle related ADO.NET to work with C#. Okay. This problem arises with number of technologies we add up to. To avoid this scenario, okay, so today I'm working with the SQL Server. I need to understand SQL Server syntax, SQL related ADO.NET objects. Tomorrow I port to Oracle database server. I need to understand SQL Server syntax for Oracle and ADO.NET objects related with Oracle. And this problem will keep on arising if we port to from Oracle to Informix, for example. Now, to avoid this particular behavior, Microsoft introduced LINQ. In LINQ, we can not only work with populated collections from a database, but will work with various other data sources like your XML files or in the memory data table. So we can use LINQ even when we are working with reflections. Reflection is the API like collections in .NET framework. You can also use LINQ in your reflections API. In .NET, any data source which implements enumerable interface, important thing. In .NET, any data source which implements this interface can be used for querying, filtering, grouping, ordering, and projecting data. So any data source which uses this interface, we can use LINQ there. That is the meaning. So LINQ can be used in any data source. Data source can be XML file, it can be a SQL server, it can be Oracle, it can be a collection, it can be a list, it can be reflection, it can be, you know, what do you call as, it can be memory related data table. If all of these are using the enumerable interface, I can use LINQ there. That is the meaning of it. Okay. Now using LINQ queries, we can use LINQ queries in two ways. One is the query syntax, one is the method syntax. Many times we use a combination of both query syntax and method syntax. I'll show you both query syntax and method syntax. I've already created the codes. Now with the evolution of entity framework, the importance of LINQ has grown much higher as compared to old times. It is because it is highly used in your entity frameworks also. What is the entity framework? Entity frameworks are used in your database designing. ER diagram, entity relationship diagrams are used to relate data tables of a database. And that what ER diagrams uses, like you talked about state transition diagram or state diagrams. Similarly, you have ER diagrams that are basically used to design your databases. All right. So that uses entity framework. So with the evolution of entity framework, importance of LINQ has increased. LINQ is used to query. If you look at LINQ is also used to query data from different sources of data, such as collections. You can use LINQ with collection, with generics, collection generics, with XML documents, area.NET objects, SQLs, web services, plus reflection. In C# and VB.NET, LINQ provides rich standardized query syntax in a .NET programming language such as C# and VB.NET, which allows developers to interact with any data source. So we will see both these ways of using LINQ, query syntax as well as method syntax, when we see examples. Now, how does the LINQ architecture looks like? Because you have to understand all these things. These are all theoretical parts. I know you get bored, but
Oh, no.
ultimately you have to understand the architecture to move forward. All right. So in C# or VB.NET can be achieved by importing which LINQ. You can see that. This is the namespace to use LINQ. So in both C# and VB.NET, you have to use this particular namespace. And the namespace is named as system.LINQ. So the one. So generally the LINQ contains a set of extension method. Okay. So LINQ will contain. So I can say that LINQ is a framework by itself. Okay, which has methods and properties which you can utilize to fetch data or to put data in a database or to XML files, or it can be used with reflection, it can be used to fetch data or put data in a collection, etc. It contains a set of extension methods, and this will allow you to query the source of data objects directly in our code based on the requirement. Okay. Look at, this is how it looks like, the architecture. You have objects, ADO.NET objects, you have relational databases like your SQL server or Oracle server or MySQL or PostgreSQL. You have XML files. So LINQ can be used to fetch or put data, to fetch and put data, to fetch and put data out here. In between this part and LINQ, where the link is sitting after the .NET application. Okay. So in between the link query and the ADO.NET objects or relation database or the XML, you have this particular part, middle part. Okay. So we know that we can develop an application in .NET. Similarly, the LINQ programming can return the any beside mentioned .NET programming language. So LINQ basically can be used with VB, C#, VB.NET, other languages of .NET also. Between the actual LINQ query, this is the LINQ query, and the underlying data source can be ADO.NET objects or relational databases or XML. There is another component also present known as link provider. So this portion that you see in the middle is called as the link provider.
Okay.
All right. So between the link query and the ADO objects, ADO.NET objects, or the relational database or XML, we have something called as the link provider. This is the provider. So what the provider does? The responsibility of the link provider is to convert link query into a format so that the data source can understand it.
I see.
So what will this provider do? It will basically convert the link query to a format which these objects or this database or this XML file understands it. So you have something called as link to XML. So link query will be converted to XML so that you can put or fetch data in XML file. Similarly, link query can be converted to a relational database format. So in the middle, you have link to datasets, which will convert to a datasets which can be utilized with your databases, or link to SQL. This can be used with your SQL servers, link to entities, which can be used with entity frameworks with the databases. Or you can also convert the link query to a format which will be understood by the ADO.NET objects. For that, we need to use link to object conversion that will convert link query to object data. And these object data can be used in your ADO.NET objects. I hope I'm clear.
Yeah.
That's very straightforward example. Okay, example of it, let's say the application wants to fetch data from SQL database. Let's say SQL database. In this case, link query will fit into the link to SQL provider. You can see there's a link to SQL provider here. Okay. In this case, it will convert the link query to TSQL, Transact SQL, which SQL server uses, so that the underlying database can understand it. So for example, this is a SQL server. Link query will be fired to fetch or put data. So what will happen? The link to SQL provider will convert it to a transactional SQL, and that will be used to transact with the relational database, which is your SQL server. Okay. If there is a need to fetch data from the XML document, we will use the link query in this case as well, which is linked to SQL provider. XML provider would convert the link query to XLLT. Extensible markup language has this particular XSLT is basically used for your for querying an XML file, so that XML data source can understand. So what will happen? Let's say I want to fetch data or get data from XML file. The link will be converted to by this link provider, link to XML provider, to a XSLT format, and that will be used to fetch or put data to an XML file. That is what this link provider does, which sits in the middle portion between the files, between the what do you call as objects or databases at one side and the link query at the other.
Okay.
Okay, so link objects, we have these links objects. You can see link to object, link to dataset, link to SQL, link to entities, link to XML. That is what is defined. We have different types of link objects available in C# and VB.NET. Link to opt, link to datasets, link to SQL, XML, link to entities. What is the need for link? It is simpler, ordered, high level than SQL. And same link query can be utilized for other databases also. If you are porting from one database to another, we don't have to run the SQL query of the database. And we do not have to basically learn the database objects also. The link is simpler, ordered at a high level than a SQL, When we want to use querying database, in most cases, LINQ is more productive than query language than SQL. Obviously, it is more productive because tomorrow I change the database, I don't have to change the LINQ query. The same LINQ query will work in other databases. Also,
Right.
we have the benefits of IntelliSense as LINQ query is written in behind the code. LINQ has full type checking at compile time so that we can catch any error in compile time itself. In C# or VB.NET, to write the query in LINQ is more fun because in compilation of the LINQ query is also done. Compilation of SQL query is never done. But LINQ being basically a framework, the compiler provides a compile time behavior for the LINQ queries. So before you run, the LINQ queries can be also compiled. So here we are taking an example of developing a .NET application. That application requires data from different data sources. For example, suppose the application needs data from SQL Server. So as a developer, to access the data from SQL Server database, we need to understand the ADO.NET and SQL Server specific syntax. If the database is Oracle, then there is a need to understand SQL syntax of Oracle, which is specific to Oracle database. The application also needs the data from XML documents, for example. So the developer to work with XML documents, we need to understand the XSLT and XPath queries. XPath is XML paths. To fetch the data from a XML file, we need to understand XPaths. So we also need to understand XSLT to fetch data or to get data or put data in XML. So here's the situation defined out here. So we are creating and developing a .NET application. We need to use SQL servers and XML documents also. In the scenario where you do not use LINQ, what is going to happen? The developer has to understand ADO.NET objects, SQL specific syntaxes. Similarly, the developer also has to understand the XML document. So for that, the developer has to understand XPaths and XSLTs also. So in the application, there is also a need to manipulate data in memory, such as list. So as a developer, there is a need to understand how to work with in-memory objects. In-memory objects can be reduced or expanded at runtime. Okay. So LINQ provides, so instead of using, so as a developer, it becomes very cumbersome, you can understand it. You have to understand so many technologies with so many syntaxes. Instead of that, LINQ can work with in-memory objects, that is with collections or list. LINQ can work with XML documents. LINQ can work with SQL servers also. So the one-stop solution to do all these activities rather than using different technologies and using syntax languages of those technologies, we can use LINQ out here. So LINQ provides a uniform programming model. Okay. So LINQ can be used to work with ADO.NET objects, which is needed out here in this scenario. LINQ can be used to work with SQL servers. LINQ can be used to work with collections or list also. So it allows us to work with different data sources. The data sources can be ADO.NET objects, SQL databases or XML documents, or simple in-memory objects, which are nothing but collections or lists. So it allows us to work with different data sources by using standard or in a unified coding style. Hence, we do not require to learn the different syntaxes required to work with ADO.NET objects or with SQL database or with XML documents or with in-memory objects like your collections or arrays. That's what this diagram says. So in the middle between the .NET application and these objects and this SQL database, you can put the LINQ query. Yeah, you're asking me something.
Oh, I was gonna say I get the main advantages of using LINQ. It makes sense so far.
All right. So what are an inference of the benefits of LINQ? You do not need to learn new query languages, syntaxes for different sources of data, because it's going to provide the standard query, uniform query language for various data sources. In LINQ, we have to write less number of codes in comparison to traditional approach of writing a code for SQL database or for memory objects like a collection, list, or arrays, or for ADO.NET objects. With the use of LINQ, we can minimize the codes, provides compile time error checking as well as IntelliSense supports in Visual Studio. This powerful feature helps us to avoid runtime errors, provides a lot of built-in methods that we can be that we can use to perform different operations such as filtering, ordering, grouping, which makes our works easy. The query of link can be reused again and again in different data sources, etc. So it's a one-stop solution that you can do. Disadvantages also out there. The disadvantage is that it's very difficult to write a complex query like SQL. In SQL, writing a complex query is easier. If link in LINQ, if you have written a complex query, that is where the complexity comes. It was written in the code, and we cannot make use of the cache execution plan, which is the SQL feature, as we do not do it in stored procedures. So SQL has caching features, which we use in stored procedures. LINQ doesn't have caching features. If the query is not written correctly, then the performance will be degraded. Okay. If we make some changes in our queries, then we need to recompile the application and need to redeploy the DRL file to the server. That's the disadvantage of your link. Okay. Now to write a ring link syntax, to write it down, we need the following three things. We need a data source, which can be a SQL or any other database, XML document, or in-memory objects like your collection, arrays, lists. We need to write a query and then execute the query. So we have three parts in the link query: data source, querying it out, execution of the query. What is a query? Nothing but a set of instructions. Queries are applied to the data source, which can be SQL, XML documents, in-memory objects, to perform operations, that is CRUD operations, and show the shape of the output from the query. This means that the query is not responsible for what will be output. Instead, it is responsible for the shape of the output. Okay. Now, what is each query consisting of? Three things. So query will have initialization part to work with a particular data source, condition part. So we have initialization, condition, and selection. Initialization means to work with a particular data source, which can be XML document, which can be a database, which can be memory objects like your collections, arrays, lists. Condition, where we define the query, where filtration is done, where sorting is done, and then selection, single selection or group selections or joining, etc. So we understand that the link query will have three things. So each query will have three things. Okay. Data source, query, and execution of the query. Now, which can be called as initialization, conditions, and selection. Okay. So the .NET framework provides the set of built-in query keywords in LINQ to allow the users to write SQL style queries. So .NET framework provides you built-in queries keywords in LINQ to allow the users to write SQL style queries. Now LINQ has three ways to write queries: query syntax, method syntax, as I was telling you, and mixed syntax, which is a combination of query and method. This is how the syntax look like. You have the initialization part from object in data source. So initialization part will be any data source, which can be XML, which can be database, or which can be in-memory objects. Then the condition, where condition can be defined, and then selection, select. These are the keywords in blue color, you can see. LINQ query keywords. So LINQ is one of the easiest ways to write the complex LINQ queries in an accessible readable format. Syntax of this type of query is much similar to SQL. This is the syntax. Very easy syntax. Okay. So for writing the query in LINQ, there is a need to follow syntax hierarchy, like from variable in the collection. This is a data source. Where we can use where for joining purpose or grouping purpose or other operators, etc., which can be a lambda expression followed by a lambda expression. Lambda is an anonymous function, kind of. Then select or group by operator, formatting the results. So we will follow this order when we are writing the queries in LINQ. Starting point of the LINQ will start from the from keyword, which is followed by a user-defined variable, followed by which specifies the source of the collection or the reference of the data, which is followed by a where clause that you can see out here. If there is a particular query that can be used before the selection to filter the record, and select is followed by and group by into the clause. So select or group by. Okay. So the order of the clauses in LINQ query will be like as shown below. From is identifier, in is a source collection, let can be an expression, where is a Boolean expression, order by is an expression, select is an expression, group by is an expression, into it is an expression. So we can use this, we'll see the usage of all these keywords. Syntax, this is for example an array, integer array, and the variable is num. It has nine values, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. So how do you use a LINQ query? This is how you use the LINQ query. From numbers variable in the collection is an array, integer array it is, where numbers is greater than 3, select the number. So what will this print out?
It will
4 5 6 7 8 9. That is what it will print out. So example out here, we have an integer list and we need to write a LINQ query that will return all the integers which are higher than 5. Here we will create a console application. So let's see that. Let's see an example. This example will, I've already created it. Let me show it. It's very easy. There's no rocket science out here. Okay, let's see this. Simple. Main class, program class, main method. Okay, this is the, you can see, this is I've created a list. Okay, it's a list of integers, you can see. Okay, it's a list of integer. It's a generic collection. System.collection is generic. It's a generic list. Okay, and the collection contains 1 to 10 items. Okay, I want to link query using the query syntax. So from the object is a variable in integer list, where object is greater than 5. That means these. Select the object. So select object will print out what? 6 7 8 9 10. Now what will I do? Execution part. For variable, for each loop, variable item in the query syntax. What will query syntax contain? These. So each query syntax means the query syntax contains these items right now, greater than 5. So item will iterate over this 6 7 8 9 times. So for each loop will run how many times? 1 2 3 5 times. Each time it runs, the query syntax value will be kept in item. So this will print out 6 7 8 9 10. Let me remove this. 6 7 8 9 10. You can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically I can basically say that greater than less than 5. So what will this query syntax contain? 1 2 3 4. For each will run 4 times because query syntax contains 4 items. Each time it runs, the item values will kept in the item variable. And I use a dynamic variable var keyword. You can see that. I can say integer item also. That's not going to change because it's the integer list of integers. But using a var keyword makes it as a dynamic variable, nothing else. Let's run this. 1 2 3 4. You can see that. And why it is printing out in the same line? Why not in different lines? 1 2 3 4, one after another. Why in the same line? Because why? Because I've used the right method, not the right line method. Right line method is going to print out in new lines. You know, 1 2 3 4. You can see that.
Okay.
All right.